Hey everybody, Greg here again to talk a little bit about consulting, being an independent consultant, and some of the things that I think that maybe you should know about if you're thinking about going down the same path of being a cybersecurity consultant like I have been for the last 5.5 years and hope to do for at least 5.5 more years. Today I want to talk a little bit about business aspects, and I know it can be kind of dry because, well, that's not really what you're in this for. You're in it to do some cool work and to obviously make some money because you want to be able to eat and provide for your family and all that. But I think that there are some things that you definitely need to consider when you first start out. And I think the most important one is considering forming your own LLC, limited liability corporation. I'm sure you've seen that before in some places. My company, VCSO Services, that's one of the first things that I did, and you'll notice that in the logo, for example, it says VCSO Services, LLC, Limited Liability Corporation. Well, what does that mean? It's pretty descriptive. It limits the liability for the person involved. Now, there are different types of LLCs. If you're just starting off on your own, I believe it's referred to as a pass-through or something like that, where basically the taxes are pretty much the same as far as filing for federal income taxes here in the United States, with a couple of other forms that you need to do. But basically, you're a sole proprietor, you're a sole owner, and you take care of all of the taxes just like you would like income tax to an extent. There are other taxes involved with regards to other taxes that you need to pay. That's a different conversation, but you need to be aware of that as well. But what the LLC does, as opposed to not forming an LLC or doing a DBA, doing business as, is that it does limit your liability in case something goes wrong and somebody sues you, to be quite honest. You make a mistake somewhere, for whatever reason, something happens and you're sued. Now, related to that is what's referred to as E&O, errors and omissions. This is insurance. This is liability insurance in case something goes wrong as well. You want to have that coverage. It's not terribly expensive, particularly for just one person and going out and doing all that. But you want to make sure that you have the proper coverage in place. And what is that coverage? Well, it could be as little as $500,000 for each instance, or you'd have to talk to a broker and go up the route. And you also may find too that clients of yours may request that you have this insurance, and you might even want to consider some cyber liability along with that as well. Although, if you follow best practices, and I believe I talked about this on a previous episode of this, you really want to limit the client information that you have access to so that you don't have much cyber liability. I don't know if cyber liability is necessary as just starting out, depending upon what controls are in place and what you're actually doing. If you're doing stuff that's more involved on their infrastructure, like you're doing penetration testing or something along those lines, well, yeah, maybe cyber liability is something to consider. You do have to consider taxes, like I said beforehand. And remember, when you're working for yourself, you're paying the amount of taxes that the employer would be paying. That's one of the differences between a contractor and an employer. You're responsible for all your taxes. Any contracting agreement that you sign will stipulate that. And if you don't understand that going in as a contractor, you're going to be very surprised as the year goes on, because you also have to file here in the States. Everything I talk about is with regards to the United States. You have to file quarterly estimates. You have to pay as you go, because you're not paying as you go like you would if you were an employee. Remember, an employee, you have your taxes taken out on a period, whatever the pay period is. Usually it's a month or something like that. Same thing with like Social Security. Social Security, you have to pay your own Social Security. You don't have the group that you're contracting with, because you're a contractor, they're not going to pay any of that stuff. You have to take care of it yourself. Now, you also have to think about, as you grow your business, whether or not the people that you bring on are going to be contractors or employees. And I'll pass on some advice that my SCORE mentor told me several years ago. If you can run with contractors, run as long as you can with contractors, because once you cross the line from contractors to employees, there's a lot more that you as the business are responsible for. Remember, employees, if you hire an employee, you have to pay their Social Security taxes, their Medicare, Medicaid, their workers' comp. There's a whole bunch of things in addition to other benefits and all of that. But you need to think about that as part of your business strategic planning when you're starting this. Now, when you're starting business too, it's like you have to think a little bit about social media. I'm going to touch upon this a little bit more when we talk about getting clients, but you definitely want to establish a social media presence on several platforms and leverage them, because you want to get your name out there, obviously. The platforms that I recommend that I've used are LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And for the most part, if you can get a handle, if you will, that's rather descriptive for what it is that you do, then that helps a little bit with people searching for you, for example, the search engine optimization. Again, I'll talk more about getting clients later in another episode. But for example, YouTube, the channel that you're looking at here, the handle for this is at VCISO. Well, someone looking for VCISO stuff probably will land on here. So it makes it a little bit more descriptive. You have to think about tools that you want to use for your business, because businesses, they don't run themselves. And when I say tools, what am I talking about? Obviously, you're going to need to have computing tools. You need to have a laptop. I actually started out with a Chromebook. And as I look over to my right, you can't see it on the camera, but my first Chromebook that I used in the business is now my TV. I just use it for TV. Because it's more or less out of date and isn't supported anymore, but hey, it's still good for bringing up Hulu. And a Chromebook worked very well for me because I decided early on that I was going to be a SaaS-based organization. All the tools that I'm going to use to support my business would need to be SaaS-based, so software as a service. Probably one of the most important ones there are what are you going to use for your basic back office stuff, like creating Word documents, or rather I should say documents and spreadsheets and that sort of thing, because you may not create Word documents necessarily. You may create Google Docs, for example, and you can always port Google Docs to Word and vice versa. The compatibility between Microsoft and Google has really become a lot better in the last few years, particularly when I first started out using Google Sheets. I actually early on also signed up and with Microsoft Office. You'll have to think, of course, like a domain name and all of that, because you'll want a web presence and you'll want to build a website, whether or not you do that through a service or you do it yourself. You'll need to establish that sort of presence as well too. And what domain name you're going to use, who's going to be your hoster. Those are necessary tools you need to think about. And then, of course, email, because your domain name is so much ingrained in what your email is. My personal opinion is that you don't want to have a generic Gmail address. If you say greatvcso@gmail.com, when you're providing a Gmail address, it really doesn't, in my opinion, this is all my opinion, it shows a level of amateurism. And what you want to project is professionalism. Domains aren't all that expensive, and it's a cost of doing business. You'll hear that phrase a lot, a cost of doing business, with regards to setting up how you're going to do the business. Project management is another one. How are you going to manage your projects? A lot of times clients want to be able to see that you can track progress, you can track time if in some instances, you can track other elements with regards to managing projects. So what I'm talking about here is that you don't necessarily have to go out and get Microsoft Project, for example. But one example that I used early on, actually used this in my previous bank career, which I really liked, and then have used it still to this day, is called Gantt chart, I believe is the name of the free software. And it provides you the ability to make a Gantt chart. There are also some other, now that's not a SaaS, oh no, they do have a SaaS component now, I just haven't used it. There are other software out there for project management. You can leverage something like Smartsheet, for example. That's also good for collaboration. We'll get to collaboration in just a moment. I've become a fan of Jira, and that was because my first client is a virtual CISO. They used Jira, and I had no idea what Jira was at the time, but I like the idea of using Jira to track and to assign issues and projects and all of that. You want to kind of get away from using spreadsheets as much as possible. Now, if you're just yourself, it's easy to manage, but as you start building clients and having folks working with you on your clients, you're going to want to look into some of these projects, some of these items. And I would suggest that since there are free versions of this, to start out and do that right out the gate. There's free Jira, there's free Confluence, there's free Smartsheets. Now, something that isn't necessarily free, and that's a secure file share. So you could do that, for example, if you are using Microsoft Office or Google. I don't think they call it G Suite now, they call it Google Works, but the Google platform where you can share off your G Drive and all of that. You can also buy products that are specific to that, such as Share File from Citrix. I always confuse SharePoint and Share File. I had to pause for a second. Yeah, I think I got it right. Dropbox or Box or something like that. But clients will ask you for a methodology how you can transfer information that's in a secure manner. And if you don't have a platform to bring to the table for that, well, here comes that professionalism thing again. They're going to really want to expect that. Now, mind you, I have said before that I prefer to use the client's infrastructure for sharing and for working on items and stuff, but you still need to have that as well too. You may actually lose out on prospects if you don't have some of these tools in place. Something very basic that you may not have thought about is your phone. You need a phone number. You need a number that they can call you at. And yes, you can go ahead and use Google Voice if you want. That again isn't as professional. I don't think though that you should give out your personal number or your personal cell phone number, because that just is not terribly professional as well too. There are some services out there. I don't mind saying that I've used Grasshopper for 5 years. Now, this isn't an explicit endorsement, obviously, of any of these products. I'm just telling you some of the things that I've used. And Grasshopper is one of those items that I looked into some different products very early on and landed on it. And it has served me well over the last almost 6 years now. And you got to think about accounting too. Probably if you're starting in cybersecurity, you're not an accountant. If you're starting out rather and being a cybersecurity consultant, you might be, I don't know. I do recommend that you have access to a CPA to help you with your finances. I certainly have done that since day one, because my core competency is information security. It is not finances. And my accountant recommended when I first started that, hey, you need to have a platform for maintaining all of your accounting stuff. So creating invoices, managing payments, managing other items, and being able to produce financials. And my CPA recommended that I look at a product called Wave from Wave Apps. And Wave actually is very good. I used that for several years. It was no cost for the basic version, no cost. And you can take care of a lot of these simple things that you need to do for a business. And again, you definitely need to keep your business finances separate from your personal finances. You need to have a separate business account. Without a doubt, you don't want to skip that. And I would suggest too that you have a separate business credit card account. There's a lot of things that you're doing if you're buying these SaaS, software as a service, these platforms. It makes the most amount of sense to pay with credit card. You could probably pay most of them with ACH, and I would imagine some of them take Bitcoin. I don't know. I just found that credit card is probably the easiest way to go. You have a running record. You can dispute if something happens. You definitely want to make sure that you have all of that separate, though, because also at the end of the year, you're going to have to produce financials. And when you produce financials, a lot of what goes in there is what can you write off as a business expense. You need to think about that as well too. So every expense that you have, it's a category, and there are certain rules to what you can and cannot write off. There are certain nuanced rules around entertainment and meals, for example. I don't know the rules. That's why I have a CPA. But I'm able to, as time goes on, if I take a client or a prospect out to lunch, for example, and I use my credit card, well, when I'm going through my accounting system, I don't use Wave anymore, but when I could have done this in Wave 2, I would have categorized that as meals and entertainment or something along those lines. And therefore, when I produce my financials at the end of the year, everything is categorized, hopefully, correctly. Now, I would also recommend that your accountant check how you're categorizing stuff, because they may come up with like a different, now you can't really write off that in that particular aspect. Now, speaking about write-ups, and this is the last item that I'll talk about today, write-offs rather, is, well, starting from the question of whether or not you're going to use a home office, or if you're going to use a co-working space, or if you're actually going to go out and get an office like I have here. Now, when I started out, I had a home office. I did everything from home. I loved it. I mean, the whole concept of being able to work from home, I never had that in my career. I never had the ability to work from home. And I mean, for various reasons, but basically what it boils down to is that the companies that I worked with, they didn't offer that. And that's okay, that's fine. And this was pre-COVID, so I saw some statistic, roughly a quarter, maybe a little bit less, of positions allowed some work at home pre-COVID, and now well over 50% do. I think it's like 57%. But I didn't like the commute. I commuted from where I lived in the Nashville suburbs up to Nashville in Tennessee. And sometimes if you all commute from suburbs to city, you know that that can be a little bit frustrating sometimes, particularly if there's an accident. And then you got to deal with downtown, you got to deal with parking. There's parking fees involved, there's gas fees involved, and you really lose time doing that. You could lose like 2 hours a day, probably on average, when you take into account getting set to leave, leaving, finding a place to park, parking, going up the elevator, getting settled in your office. Whereas if you're working from home, you can just walk in your pajamas across the house to your home office. It's great, sort of. For someone like me, after 6 months, I was going crazy. I needed to be around people. I didn't necessarily need to be around people that I worked with. I just needed to be around people. And for me, going out and going to like a Starbucks or something, I don't know why we always use Starbucks as an example for like finding a place with Wi-Fi. I never go to Starbucks. But finding a place with Wi-Fi and working, I did that a couple of times, thought it was cool, and then, yeah, that got kind of old. So I started off with a co-working space. Just two days a week, I'd go in, find my favorite cube, and work in that space. And then the time came that, well, an office, a very small office, about 50 square feet, became available in that co-working space. And I decided, well, it was a different co-working space, same company, and I decided to take it because I found that I could be more efficient if I actually had my stuff with me. And so then I still was doing some work from my home office, but more and more I was doing from my office. And then sometime later, about a year ago now, I moved into this much larger office, about 120 square feet. Suits me very well. I can get an awful lot done. Yes, you got to pay for it. It's a cost of doing business, obvious. It's not cheap. But you have to weigh whether or not that's something that is worth it for what you do. And what I found is in keeping me more efficient, having stuff around, having all my equipment here, and just being able to have a place to come and decompress, it's very much worth it. So that's the final thing that you need to consider. You're going to work from home, or you're not going to work from home, and how you're going to manage all that. If you work from home, remember you could have some write-offs with regards to square footage, with regards to internet connection and all of that. But talk to your accountant about those sorts of things. So that's it for today. I hope you're enjoying this. If you've got some comments or questions, please leave them in the channel. We'd love it if you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Again, our handle here is @VCISO. It's very easy to remember. And look forward to talking to you next time. And again, thank you for listening. Hope it's been something very much useful for you.